It's Julien looks under things with Julien who looks under things, and Nicole is there sometimes, so let's go look under things.
Hello everyone and welcome to Iceland. So, the land of ice. Woo! And fire. And so cool. Oh my god. And no mosquitoes. It is a very beautiful country, and well, it captures the imagination of a lot of people. But you're probably wondering, what am I doing here? Because, well, I've been to Australia, I've been to the temperate forests of eastern Canada, and as well as, I've talked about the Red River. It's a little different, right? Yeah, you're wondering correctly. There's actually two reasons why I'm here, and the first one is, hello, Nicole.
Oh, hello, I was just walking by. Just thought I'd stop in.
Yeah, well, do you want to explain why we are in Iceland?
Well, we're in Iceland because of me. I decided to go to school here at the Iceland Academy of the Arts.
He found Jetta's ring, and he still got it. He still got it.
Or Lista Háskóli Íslands, you know, because I have to try to sound as Icelandic as I can. And I also have family in Iceland, so my mom's family's from Iceland.
Yeah. So how is it that you have Canadian and Icelandic heritage?
Well, it's a bit tricky to pinpoint in terms of the exact year from my recollection when they arrived, but it's most of the Western Icelanders,
birds,
as we call them. Oh, there's birds.
Yeah. You can continue.
Oh, it's around the late 1800s, and my family left from the north part of Iceland, where most of the Western Icelanders left from the west because the Mount Hekla had erupted, and so it was kind of a big event. So they went to, you know, the Manitoba, Winnipeg area, as well as Gimle, Lundar, Vogar, like those very Icelandic names. There's a Hekla Road, there's Hekla Island actually, or Húsavík Road I should say.
That's where I hurt my knee.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Anytime. I'll carry on my walk, I suppose.
All right.
Great to see you.
Yeah, go study for your exams.
Okay, bye for now.
So yeah, that's the first reason. The second reason, well, is because I was curious to see what kind of invertebrate life they had here. Once I decided to follow Nicole here, I tried to figure out what kind of bugs can I see. And the main thing I found was that they have no mosquitoes, which, yeah, does not really tell me anything. They do have biting midges, like the black flies. Black flies, always the black flies, no matter where you go. With the black flies picking my bones in North Ontario, ayo, in North Ontario.
I was just passing through. I thought I'd say hello.
Yeah, thanks for passing by.
Anytime.
It's great. We'll probably just run into each other a few other times.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just out for a jaunt.
Yeah, me too. It's great.
It's great. And away I go.
Bye. I looked for documentaries in Iceland, and I saw that they kind of all showed the same things. So it was all, you know, volcanoes and waterfalls and puffins. The puffins are really cute. I have gone to see the puffins, and I will talk about them. But yeah, nothing really about the insects besides the lack of mosquitoes. So I figured that, that is a very good challenge for me. And, well, there's no one else who is doing that, so here we are. Let's go and take a look at the bugs and the birds too, and a few other stuff. Anything that, you know, crawls. So why is it a little bit more difficult to find insect life in Iceland? There you go. Oh. Well, this goes with, well, how old Iceland is and the types of disturbances that are here. Iceland is actually quite young compared to the other places I've been to, so Canada, Australia, and whatnot. The oldest rocks of Iceland are only 14 million years old, compared to the oldest rocks of Canada, who are 2 billion. Little difference, 1 million seconds is a week, 1 billion seconds is 30 years. So, Yeah, and the youngest rocks of Iceland, depending on when you're watching this documentary, are 2 years old.
Oh my god, you can see the smoke like blooming.
Yeah, and I think I found a very good setting on my camera. You can see it very well. Oh boy.
Because, well, Iceland is created through volcanic activity, and that activity is still happening.
Nature's scary here.
So that goes with the disturbances. Evolution is hard here. You have, well, again, the volcanic activity that will just cover the land and reset everything. Nothing can evolve to resist lava, no matter how much the tourists think they can. And then also, again, there was less time for animals to evolve here too, because, well, Iceland was covered by glaciers till 10,000 years ago during the Ice Age. Now, you compare that to the rainforest, which has less disturbances. There is time for bugs and other critters to evolve. Like an example, the Daintree rainforest in Australia is 100 million years old. Now, besides that, the glaciers and the volcanoes, you also have just the climate of Iceland, which is very chaotic. I'm good thanks to my Lopapesa, but it is windy, it is rainy, and it changes on a dime, which is hard when you're a tiny little insect. Another thing too is the disturbance of humans. Humans started to arrive in Iceland around 1,000 years ago, and as soon as they arrived, they started to cut down the trees that grew here. There are consequences to those actions, but also solutions. So what's great about Iceland is that it shows us how we directly affect our environment, but also how we can fix it. So basically, all those disturbances will reset the succession of ecosystems very quickly. So what is the succession of ecosystems? Well, basically, it is how one ecosystem turns into another. So when you have something that resets, you are left with bare rocks, and the first thing that will grow on the rocks will be the moss and the lichen. Moss and lichen will create soil, which will then be used by grass and shrubs, and after a nice amount of time, you will get the trees. And if there's a disturbance,
a bunny.
The cycle restarts. And in Iceland, there's a lot of that. So, we are going to go take a look at all those ecosystems. We're going to start with the coast. So Iceland is an island, and that's where life started here. And then we're going to go take a look at the rocks with its moss and lichen, and then the tundra with the grasses, and then finally the boreal forest. So the first ecosystem we'll take a look at is the coast. So this is where the ocean and the land will meet. Oh my God! So basically, the coast of Iceland can be a little bit diverse. We will usually find the black sand beaches because, well, volcanic activity creates black sand. There are, however, a few white sand beaches, but it's not just sand you'll see. There's also a lot of polished volcanic rocks. And well, there's also cliffs, like the one in Lautrabjorg that I have been to. Very scary. And also one of the oldest sections of Iceland. Yeah, lots of dynamic things happening on the coast. First, you have the tide that will bring in nutrients in the form of the algae, because we are in, well, colder ocean. Whew. Instead of coral, we have a lot of algae like kelp that will bring a lot of birds and, well, a few other critters that the birds are going to be feeding on. So we're going to go take a look at that. So Iceland is located in the northern Atlantic Ocean, which is quite biodiverse because, well, it is in the northern oceans and they are quite cold. That cold will make it so there is a higher amount of oxygen in the water and there is a lot of currents. meaning that, well, fish and zooplankton will really, really, really love this, which, well, will make it so seabirds will really, really love this.
Look at them all! It's the bird cliff in
On top of that, Iceland makes it so the ocean is shallower so that the sun can shine through and help algae grow. And especially with those kelps, they will form shelter for those fishies. Now, on top of that too, Iceland will be important for those birds because, well, they can actually have a place to raise their youngs. Seabirds can, well, spend a lot of time on the water and in the air, but to have babies, they need dry land. So what kind of seabirds do we see? So we've got the northern fulmar, who at first looks like just a regular seagull, but afterwards you see that they have they're a bit different. They look a bit parrot-like, and that's mostly with their beak appearing a bit more thicker because of those little tubes on them, similar to what albatrosses have. Apparently they can puke on their enemies. We do have quite a few gulls. You get the black-backed gulls, who are quite big, and there's also the kittiwakes. The kittiwakes look like tiny gulls, but they're quite loud. They go, oh. We also get the eiders, so the common eider, which is the heaviest or biggest duck in the world, important for the Icelandic economy because their down is very, very warm. And they're just very beautiful ducks, so fascinating to see. And of course, we have the puffins. So there are around 4 species of puffins around the world, but I've only seen the Atlantic puffin, a very fascinating bird. So they are auks. They're basically like the Arctic version of penguins in the Antarctic. So they are very good at swimming underwater, and they'll spend a lot of time underwater. They also have reduced wings, but the puffins are still very interesting flyers. You'll see them just launch themselves from bird cliffs and just jump out of that, and it seems like they're so small, the wind just pushes them, but they seem completely comfortable with that. And then when they come back, they're like, ooh, they have to like extend everything to make sure that they don't crash. But oh, fascinating little creatures. They pair up. They're monogamous, so they pair up for life. It's really cute when you see them come back because they always give each other little kisses. Oh, it's so cute. And yeah, their big beak is very useful for forming tunnels in the rock cliffs. Now, again, like I said, they need those places to be able to raise their youngs, and 60% of the Atlantic puffin population will be nesting in Iceland, and they're not the only bird species that do that. Not just in Iceland, but across the world. Birds have, with nesting and with migration, they have specific little places where most of the population will use, which makes them very vulnerable to changes in the environment. The Atlantic puffin is currently vulnerable. That is because of changes in the water from climate change. When the climate change is making the water warmer, that means there's less oxygen, and that also affects the currents of the ocean. So that means that there is less fish around Iceland, so the Atlantic puffin is having a harder time feeding its youngs. It's important to keep that in mind because, well, the birds, they're basically indicators that there is a bigger problem. When there's a problem with the birds, there's going to be usually a problem with the bugs, which we will talk a little bit later. And I know that the problem of climate change seems very big, but don't worry, I'll explain more how we can help near the end of my documentary. Iceland is important for the puffin and those birds are important for Iceland. So by basically coming here in those huge numbers, there's going to be a lot of bird poop. And that poop contains a lot of vital nutrients for the land. And also, those birds will be bringing bugs and seeds and other things. So yeah, what kind of invertebrates are going to be brought to the coasts? So first we have, of course, the marine invertebrates, who are controlled by the tides. We'll get a lot of barnacles and sea snails. So both of those animals are able to adapt to a place that has a lot of water, but then becomes very dry. So they basically they both kind of have a shell that they can just take cover during low tide. What's interesting is that, well, this is a convergent evolution. They are not related animals. The barnacles are crustaceans, arthropods. It's just like crabs, but while crabs can move and stuff, the barnacles stay where they are. So when they reproduce, they need to have a very long reproductive organ. Sea snails, on the other hand, they are able to move with their shell. What's cool with sea snails is that unlike land snails who are hermaphroditic, they have both reproductive sexes, sea snails will have male and female sexes. It's quite interesting. Now, we have those guys, and then we have the terrestrial invertebrates that, well, are either brought by birds or brought by floating logs. Fascinating. They have to be very resilient for that. So we get the mites, so the acariformes. Those are the mites. They're related to ticks, but they're not parasites like ticks, so it's okay. If you see one, that's cool. The ones I've seen in Iceland are red with a little pointy nose. I have seen those also a little bit in Canada, and I think they are scavengers. What's fascinating with those guys is that I have not been able to really get a lot of info on them. The best information I've had was from like some of the panels in the wildlife resorts that said that apparently they're useful because they are food for the fish, specifically young salmon. I don't know how that works, but basically it was written in Icelandic. I'm still trying to learn Icelandic, and I have, well, my friends and Nika's family are helping me translate all that, and Google Translate. But, you know, Google Translate, my friends and Nika's family are not biologists. So, yeah, I hope this documentary encourages other people to do more thorough research. Now, one animal I've been able to get a little bit more information was the weevil with the scientific name Barinotis squamosus. Apparently it is common in Iceland, the south of Iceland, and the northern parts of Scandinavia and Europe. So this nice-sized weevil is a little, well, it likes to eat the leaves of coastal plants. It likes the coast that is nice and humid, and mostly comes out at night. So that's probably why the one I saw was a little confused. It was during the day. And, well, most weevils will usually lay their eggs underground, and that one does that too. So the larvae of this beetle will be eating roots, and then as an adult, it will emerge and eat leaves. And that, well, speaking of the ground,
let's talk about the bare rocks. So it looks barren, but
there's a daddy long legs right there.
let's see here. 1 second. Yeah, so there's the daddy long legs. So I see them quite often on those rocks, but what's interesting with this guy, there's his little eyes over here.
So what makes them special is that they are extrusive igneous rocks. Igneous rocks are rocks that are dried up lava or magma. Extrusive means lava over the Earth's crust. Intrusive means magma under the Earth's crust. Now, intrusive igneous rocks, like the ones in Canada, granite usually, cool very slowly and form large crystals, so they are very, very solid. Now with those guys, they don't have time to form crystals because they dry up very quickly. So what's going to happen is that they're just very easy to erode, and they will have a lot of minerals, so that soil will be very fertile. That means that the moss and the lichen can easily break it down and create soil, and also just underground they will be eroded by water and a bunch of things like that, which will create like a bunch of little tiny pockets that will make it porous, and a lot of bugs love it there.
Hi, Daddy Longlegs. Didn't mean to surprise you. Oh. There's the little millipede again.
So let's go take a look at what lives on the rocks and under the rocks. Well, example here, just daddy long legs.
So of course, the first thing we'll see on those rocks is the lichen and the moss. So how are they able to live so well on bare rock? So they have adaptations that let them live with not that much things and also survive periods of drought, cold, and dryness. First, the moss. The moss is a very ancestral plant. So one of the first plants, well, that managed to settle on the land itself. So they are non-vascular plants. That makes it so mosses can't really grow very quickly or very tall. But that means that by being not too complicated, they just need a little bit of sunlight and water, but they can actually absorb a lot of water. The cells of the moss are basically like big sponges, so they can absorb a lot of water, and the cells can also survive when there's no water. So when moss dries up, unlike other plants, it's not dead, it's just sleeping. With lichen, it's a little bit of the same thing, except this time it is a symbiosis between algae and fungi. So algae are not quite plants yet, but basically they will photosynthesize, so they will make food from the sun. And normally algae need to be in water, so they would not be able to survive on a rock, but here they're able to survive thanks to the fungi. So fungi do need to decompose things to make their own food, which is, well, hard to do on a rock. So what they do is that, well, they will use the algae to get some sugar from that photosynthesis. And in return, it will protect the algae from drying out when there isn't any water. Both of those will help create the soil, because as they grow and die, and that cycle of life that will, start to decompose things, and they also decompose the rock itself by creating organic acids that will help to break things down. Now, with those ones, they are heavily protected in Iceland because they grow very, very slowly. And if you walk on them or destroy them, it's going to take a long time for them to grow back. So that's a message for tourists. Respect the moss in Iceland. Respect the lichen. They are very beautiful, but very fragile. So, now the animals. Well, I was very happy that in Iceland I was able to look under the rocks carefully, unlike Australia. So what do you notice at first when you look under those rocks? So, like back home, we're gonna find some earthworms and potworms. So, well, yeah, earthworms are important to create the soil. They are very good decomposers by, just eating stuff and pooping out soil. They are segmented worms, meaning that, their bodies are divided into segments that each have their individual muscles that let them extend and contract and do a lot of things. The potworms differ a little bit from the earthworms. So the earthworms are usually pink. The potworms, who are also segmented worms, are more transparent white. I can't find a lot of information on them besides that there is one genus of potworms that can live in glaciers. I've been to glaciers. I don't know if they're in the glaciers of Iceland. That would be very cool to see. I don't exactly know how earthworms got to Iceland. There's the island of Surtsey near Iceland, which is a new island that scientists are observing very closely just to monitor what is able to settle on this island. And apparently earthworms have gotten on this island thanks to birds, but they didn't survive. But I don't know how they got to Iceland, and I haven't been able to really find a lot of information on that. There are some worms that are being imported, apparently, to help with the soil. This is quite different from North America, where earthworms are actually apparently invasive. Because they were killed off during the Ice Age, and apparently it is the fungi that took their place as the main decomposers, and those worms are harming the fungi. Now, the other things you'll notice under the rocks are the snails and the slugs, so the gastropods. So the land snails specifically. There's quite a few land snails in Iceland. They're quite small, they're quite cute. And yeah, snails, even though they are, well, very humid creatures, they need mucus to move, they are able to hide in their shells to basically take shelter from the dry weather. And they do like to be under the rocks because it's going to be a little bit more humid there. What I've been very surprised to find are the slugs, because slugs are a derived form of the snails. So snails are apparently continuing to evolve into slugs. Quite fascinating. I think it makes them a little faster and able to, go into tighter spots. And the slugs, you can see that they really like the pockets in the lava rocks, both from erosion and just those air bubbles that were created while the lava was cooling. And apparently Iceland has one species of endemic slug. And there's not a lot that is known about it, because apparently it looks a lot like another type of slug that is not endemic to Iceland. So we don't know if that endemic slug is endangered or not. So it is, it's an important thing to figure out, because, we want to know how our little animals are doing. And like I said earlier with the birds, when there's a problem with one species, there's usually a problem with other species. But slugs are important decomposers as well. I also found millipedes, so millipedes as myriapods, who are also fun scavengers that you can find under rocks. They need to be there because the way they breathe is, like with insects, they have what's called a tracheal system, which is basically just little holes in their body that brings air directly to their organs or cells. And with insects, it can be dry. They don't really need humidity for that, but with myriapods, they need humidity in their tracheal system or their spiracles to help with the exchange of gases. And, well, I don't exactly know what kind of species I've been seeing, but they're very cute, yellow with like little red spots. It's full of fun surprises. One arthropod I have more information on is, well, the beetles. I love talking about the beetles because, well, very numerous. And under the rocks of Iceland, you will find two beetles. The rove beetle with its long body, but I haven't been able to film it for long. And the ground beetle that is both a predator and a scavenger. So those beetles are not just important for the ecosystem, but also for archaeology. Because archaeologists and historian will study them because it seems that they also have been brought by the Vikings and would have lived with the Vikings in their homes and alongside their animals. So by looking at those different beetles, which ones were already here, which ones were added, and which ones live with what kind of animal, we can get a clearer picture of life back then. Another thing that I've seen, the springtails. I've talked about springtails before, but I keep learning more about them, and that makes me very happy because they are so cute and so tiny. So yeah, springtails, from what I found out, are apparently one of the most numerous animals on Earth. So beetles have the most amount of species. Springtails, by weight and number, they are very, very numerous, on par with the nematodes. Nematodes are roundworms. So you will find, if you know how to look, springtails almost everywhere in Iceland, on the coasts, in the forests, in the plants, but mostly you will find them on rocks. They like to be under rocks or near sources of water because, well, they are closely related to insects. They are hexapods, meaning they have 6 legs. They don't have a tracheal system. They simply absorb oxygen directly from the environment through their exoskeleton. Pretty interesting. Yeah. So they need to be somewhere nice and humid, but they're also very hardy. With the study on Surtsey Island, they arrived alongside the mites on floating logs. Now, what makes them also different from insects is their mouth parts. They are inner mouth parts, so it's kind of, if I'm correct, more like our mouth. So instead of having mandibles that are outside the mouth, everything's more inside, but they do have an opening. They are still also quite diverse. There are 3 orders of springtails, and I have been able to observe them all. And it goes with their body shape. It's quite cute. So the first order is the Poduromorpha. So those ones are very funny because they have a long body and stubby legs. They're a bit slower than the other springtails, but they can still jump. That's another thing with springtails. They'll jump. It's really cute. So yeah, Poduromorpha, long body, very stubby legs. Then we have the Entomobryomorpha. Those ones are usually the ones I see, I think, the most. They have a very slim body, slim legs, and long antenna. So I've been able to see those ones also in Australia. Their body is, quite slim, and they're usually very fast. So Entomobryomorpha, slim body. And then there's the Symphipleona. Yeah, that's what they're called. And their whole shtick is that they're spherical. They are round body, round head, sometimes long antennas, but man, they are very, very cute. They are also little scavengers, so yeah, very important for creating that soil, and they are also a very important source of food for quite a few animals. They'll be eaten by the mites, but also specifically the daddy longlegs. So yeah, there you go. Like I just saw, daddy longlegs are opilione, so they are members of the arachnid family, but unlike spiders, they have a fused body part. And I've talked quite a bit about daddy longlegs. We do see them quite a lot in Canada and other places like that. What was really fun with seeing daddy longlegs was that I was able to kind of observe one of the sort of rules about animals in the Arctic is that animals that live in areas that are colder will tend to have a bigger body and shorter leg ratio to help them keep heat. And I don't know if that's the true thing about the daddy longlegs, but it seemed like that. Back home, where the summers are very hot, the daddy longlegs will have usually a very small body and very long legs. But here, most of the daddy longlegs I've been seeing have very, very big body and quite short legs, and that is very fascinating. So they'll be spending time on the rocks, but you will also see the daddy longlegs walking about on the tundra. So let's go talk about that.
Now we have the tundra, or the grasslands, the Arctic grasslands. They are, the environment you can kind of see the most in Iceland. It is very widespread, mostly because, the sheep. Yeah. The sheep, humans, and the horses. It's mostly the sheep that will eat the trees and stuff that encroach naturally on prairies. Now, what's really interesting about the plants of the grasslands of Iceland is that there's actually 2 hypotheses on how they got here. Because humans bring stuff, but it was like that too when humans arrived. So those 2 hypotheses are, and they might work together, is that the first one, they were plants from before the Ice Age. The seeds kind of just slept under the glaciers and then they sprouted again, or, they were just brought here by the winds. It does make sense because you can see those things in other parts of the world. This is pretty much how a lot of island areas get their wildlife. The Amazon rainforest does get a lot of sand from the Sahara, and that's how it gets so fertile and everything. And even though they're kept in check by sheep and stuff, those grasses are very hardy. They need to be able to survive near salt water, winds, cold seasons that just kind of change all the time. And the animals that live around there need to do the same. Another thing that's really fun about the grasslands is that, just like in Canada, there's a lot of wetlands. So, that's what we have right here. And wetlands are extremely important ecosystems. So let's go take a look at the creatures that live in the grasslands and the wetlands of Iceland.
So while back home in Canada, the prairies were mostly destroyed to make way for farmland. In Iceland, well, the main thing that is used in farming is the sheep. So basically, the prairies are mostly kept intact for them, as well as the Icelandic horse, who is quite a special horse, because they spend a lot of time without predators. They're a bit more like cats than horses. Yeah. So, while the sheep maintains the prairie by pushing back the advancement of trees, we have to talk about the animals that help maintain the prairie plants themselves. And those are, of course, the pollinators. I'm always going to be talking about pollinators. One of the main pollinators in Iceland, and one of the earliest one that we know of, is the heath bumblebee. This bumblebee likely arrived around 1,000 years ago alongside the Vikings. And yeah, bumblebees are the eusocial insects, so the insects that live in colonies that are able to live the most far north. They can fly at quite low temperatures, and a lot of that is helped with all that fuzz, and they're a little bit bigger, so they can retain heat much more easily. However, this bumblebee is having some problems because it is not the only bumblebee now. In the 50s, there was the white-tailed bumblebee that arrived, and it is causing the heath bumblebee population to go down. This bumblebee is a little bit more aggressive, not necessarily in the fighting kind of way, but in the trickster kind of way. So that bumblebee has quite a short proboscis, so like a little trunk to slurp out nectar. Most bumblebees have a long proboscis that lets them drink from long flowers, but this one doesn't have that, but it won't let it stop her. So what she's gonna do is drill holes on the side of flowers to, drink from it. It's a little tough to know the difference between the heath and the white-tailed bumblebee. Both have that white band. The heath bumblebee usually has more of a yellowish face, while the white-tailed bumblebee doesn't have that. There's another bumblebee that has been found in Iceland. It was found in 2008, and that is the tree bumblebee. So that one is black and has a thorax and head that is rusty colored. Sometimes they're fully black. They also have that little white stripe on their bum or their abdomen. However, the tree bumblebee does not seem to be invasive. It is only found where humans live. It's not able to really live way more out there in Iceland. Now, those are not the only bees found in Iceland. There is also the honeybee. Iceland is the last place that the honeybee has been introduced. But unlike, again, in North America where they are invasive, it seems like they're not. They are not having the easiest time to live there. Again, they are eusocial insects, and the eusocial insects that are the most resistant to cold are the bumblebees. There's apparently only 100 active beekeepers in Iceland, and they are very careful about the spreading of diseases that might happen with when insects are introduced. And also the hives apparently are not self-sufficient. Now, one insect pollinator related to bees that is starting to be self-sufficient is the Norwegian wasp. So that is a yellow jacket. Wasps, specifically yellow jacket wasps, have tried a few times and failed to settle themselves in Iceland. Again, it is cold, it is windy. Wasps need quite a bit of heat to be able to fly. But the Norwegian wasp apparently is slowly and surely able to integrate itself into the ecosystem. That is more going to be a little bit of a problem for the people in Iceland, both the Icelanders and the tourists, so I will help you guys. Again, the Norwegian wasp is a yellow jacket, and it works just like the ones in Europe and in America. Yellow jackets, the workers, they will spend the summer basically hunting bugs, feeding them to the larvae laid by the queen. The larvae will release a type of syrup that is sugary that the workers will eat. Once we get into the end of summer and fall, the queen basically leaves or dies. The new queens are gonna go and hibernate. The workers are left by themselves and they want some sugar, so they're gonna go first pollinate the flowers, then they're gonna eat the berries, and then they're gonna go, after the humans who are eating ice cream outside. So, for anyone in Iceland, basically, to not have problems with the wasps, just don't eat ice cream outside in August and September, and basically restart eating ice cream outside once the first frost hits. Now, the pollinator that is the most apparent in the prairies and the tundras of Iceland is the moth. There's a lot of moths, a lot of endemic species of moths. And moths, like the bumblebee, are very well adapted to the cold. They are all fuzzy and everything. I have had a hard time filming the moths. A good reason is just that they're very skittish. It makes sense because, well, they are full of protein, and there's also a lot of birds in the tundra of Iceland that would love and need a nice meal from them. We have the redwings, who are a subspecies of the redwing found in Europe, who are thrushes related to American robins. And redwings in Europe are in a vulnerable situation. I don't know about the subspecies of redwings in Iceland, but you also see the blackbirds, another thrush, and you also see the golden plovers, the snow buntings, and the wagtails. Bunch of fun birds. So, yeah, I haven't been really able to film the moths, but I have been able to find a lot of their caterpillars.
All right, have a good day, caterpillar. You were oh no!
Just something that was very interesting with the caterpillars is that I found them mostly on flowers. I don't know why. I don't know if it's safer on flowers for them, or they drank nectar, or they ate the flowers instead of leaves, but that is quite interesting. So yeah, another thing, if someone knows the answer, or if more people want to research the caterpillars of Iceland, well, there's something you can do. Now, the moths are the most prominent, but they are not the most numerous of the pollinators. And the most numerous pollinators, and probably the most numerous insects in Iceland, are the flies. So flies, well, they're everywhere. They are hardy. They eat almost anything. There are dung flies in Iceland. They are actually quite cute, even though they eat poop. But that is not the only fly, and that is not the only thing they eat. We get the crane flies. So the crane flies are the ones that have those long legs that kind of look like mosquitoes, but they are not mosquitoes. And I don't have a lot of information on the crane fly, just that those in Iceland were the biggest crane flies I have ever seen. It goes with another rule in the Arctic. I think that's Bergman's rule. This is basically that animals in the cold will usually be quite big, which with insects mostly they're usually quite big in the south, but again, a lot of things. Nature's interesting. The main pollinator flies will be the hoverflies. So hoverflies are also found all over the world, and they use Batesian mimicry, which means that they mimic a venomous or poisonous animal even though they don't have venom themselves or poison themselves. And the hoverflies mimic wasp and bees by being yellow and black. There is apparently an endemic species of hoverfly in Iceland. So one hoverfly that is only found in Iceland. Maybe I saw it, maybe I didn't. I don't know. Hoverflies are tough to film as well because they are fast. And of course, with the other types, you get the houseflies, you get the midges, who are a very important source of food for birds. Most midges do not feed in adulthood, and they will be spending most of their life underwater as larvae. So there are some in Canada and, well, in Iceland as well, and they will be spending most of their life in the wetlands of Iceland, in the fresh water of Iceland. So Iceland has a lot of fresh water. It is very beautiful water, very clear, and it will have a lot of marshes and fens. So marshes are the wetlands that have mostly grass, compared to swamps who have mostly trees, and fens are peat land with flowing water. So peat is basically moss that accumulates and dies on itself. So fens are the ones with flowing water. Bogs do not have flowing water, and they only get water from the rain. Wetlands are some of the most biodiverse and rich ecosystems on Earth, on par with tropical forest, and that is basically everywhere, and well, it is pretty much the same in Iceland. At first glance, the wetlands of Iceland will seem quite empty because there's no frogs or turtles. There's no amphibians and no reptiles in Iceland, and I do miss them. But you do see quite a few things. There's going to be waterfowl, so the swans and the ducks and the geese, they get the gray-legged goose. And also, you will sometimes see the red-throated loon, which that was a lifer for me. That's a really beautiful bird. Loons are already really cool, and then you have this loon that's like just a little bit more. But yeah, I wasn't able to film it long because of the horse I was on. Oh no, the horse is moving. Okay. And well, those birds will be attracted by the wildlife in there. So of course, there's going to be plankton. So very small organisms that are either larvae or crustaceans, like the copepods and the daphnia, which you see back home as well. But there will also be pond snails, just like at home. So pond snails are very important because they are a source of calcium for expecting duck mothers. So the hen ducks, they need to eat those to be able to get calcium, not just for their own bones, but for their eggs. Pond snails, what makes them cool is that, well, like we were talking, there's the land snails who have to breathe air, and the marine snails that have to be in water. Pond snails are in water but need to breathe air. It is very fascinating. And the best surprise I think that we found here in Iceland was a leech. It was actually Nicole who found it.
I thought you found it.
No, you found the leech.
Really?
Yeah, you did.
Oh.
Yeah, come here.
Okay, so the leech, basically, I found it. It was kind of wiggling in the container. Julien scooped up the water, and then I went, hey, what's that? And you said, oh, I don't know, it's not moving much. And then I disturbed the water a little because I thought that it has to be something. I didn't scare it, but I disturbed it enough that it went, woo.
Yeah.
And started wiggling, and then I was like, whoa, it's a slug. And then you picked it up, and you're like, I don't think it's a slug. And I was like, it's a leech?
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah. I was like, oh, wow, don't get it on your skin. It's going to go.
Yeah, not all leeches will drink our blood. Leeches are segmented worms. They are related to earthworms.
What?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
I'm going to miss the movie.
So
Maybe cut this out.
the leech I found specifically, I don't know the species, but it is a green leech. I know from those leeches that they take care of their youngs. So leeches, like earthworms, are hermaphroditic, so both reproductive sexes. And what's cute is that they keep their eggs and babies on their belly until they are ready to go off on their own. Leeches are very hardy. They're able to live in polluted environments, but just because you find leeches doesn't mean the place is polluted, because I found other animals. I found the diving beetles. So diving beetles are beetles who swim in the water. They keep a little bubble on their abdomen to be able to breathe, and most of them are predators, so they hunt other things. They start their lives as a larvae in the water called the water tiger, who is also a predator, who is also really cool, who has a little snorkel to breathe on its abdomen. And yeah, they are vulnerable to pollution and loss of habitat. So if you see them, that means that the place is clean. And it is very, very important to maintain wetlands because they help a lot with the environment. When people ask me what can they do for the environment, a big thing I say is preserve and protect wetlands because, well, besides having a large amount of species, they help to keep water to prevent flooding, and they also, clean water. And well, with Iceland, another thing that is important against floodings and other problems will be the trees.
And now we are in the forest, the newest ecosystem in Iceland. Now, why is that? Like we talked before, Iceland used to be covered by forests. It was the boreal forest, and those were cut down by the Vikings. And now in the 1940s, Icelanders started to understand the importance of those trees on the overall environment, so they started to plant them to make sure to reduce the erosion of the land and, well, also to sequester carbon, to better fight climate change, and just a bunch of other things, just to, in overall, promote the resiliency of the ecosystems. During that same time in Canada, we actually have the revitalization of wetlands to do that same thing. Now, as we can see over here, this work is successful, but it is not done. There are still challenges. Those forests are taking time to regrow, mostly because, well, the Icelandic population is quite low, around half the population of Winnipeg. And also, the funding for those programs fluctuates quite a bit. The biggest obstacle, however, is, well, the weather.
Control lady who was like, hey, I want to ride on the ship.
And it is then very hard for those trees to really establish themselves, especially because, well, they're just placed there. And trees need a community that is already established to really resist changes in the environment and changes in the weather. A lot of trees will help each other in exchanging nutrients and in communicating with each other with the help of the mycelial network, the fungi, mushrooms who will be helping with all of that. And if we want mushrooms, we need good soil that has been established by those previous successions of ecosystems. So that shows us why it is easier to protect existing trees than replanting them.
Boo!
But also, well, what must be done if we want to replant trees? We need a nice little community of, different trees, kind of like how we need different people in our community. And another thing that is happening is, well, once you have a new ecosystem, again, this one is very young, started in the 1940s. The boreal forest in Canada is 5,000 years old, so it, took time. The animals had time to come here. So, a lot of animals are starting to arrive, and because for them, it's free real estate. And that's gonna be a little bit too much sometimes for the trees to handle. A lot of them will be, well, making their homes in trees or eating parts of the tree. And, well, with not all the niches covered, it's going to be hard for the trees. So we're gonna go see those animals, see what is happening, what is going to happen, and, well, learn about the possible futures of Iceland.
So the trees are very well appreciated by the bird life of Iceland. You will see usually in them during the winter the redpolls, who are also seen in Canada, and as well as a new introduced animal in Iceland, the domesticated rabbit. So Iceland has feral rabbit populations. Feral means, domestic animal that goes back to the wild. Basically, domesticated rabbits are descendants of European rabbits. Now, there are less insects that I have seen among the trees, mostly because, well, again, it is a new environment. One native insect I have seen is the winter moth, and that is probably my favorite found in Iceland. They are found throughout Europe, but it's my first one. It's the first time I've seen it here. So, what is very interesting is that the female does not have wings. She just has little nubbins. So basically, She pupates into the adult form in October, so very close to the winter, and then will just climb a tree or any surface that she can find, and she'll emit pheromones, and that will attract the males. The males can fly, and they can apparently fly in 0 degrees Celsius weather, which is absolutely fascinating. Apparently the way that the male is able to fly at such low temperature is because he will create his own heat. He is endothermic, almost warm-blooded, just like us. So basically, instead of using the metabolism that we do, he will just shiver and move his muscles very quickly, which will create heat. And he has, well, fuzz or fur to basically insulate him from the outside. That is fascinating in this tiny little thing. So yeah, very fascinating. Now, most of the insects that I have seen around the trees are actually introduced insects. One type is the sawflies. So sawflies are very interesting animals. They're more ancestral, so older lineage within the family of ants, bees, and wasps. I usually confuse them for a wasp, but you can tell that they're not an actual fly because they have longer antennas. Flies have very short antennas. So they're called sawflies because the females, their abdomens will have like a saw-like structure that will dig holes in trees to lay their eggs. One of the sawflies I've seen in Iceland has the scientific name Scolioneura betuleti, and it was found only in 2017. Yeah, so very recent arrival. Apparently they are causing quite a bit of problems to the trees, specifically the birch trees of Iceland. On top of that, there is also the Fratora leaf beetle, specifically the brassy leaf beetle. So leaf beetles also, they will eat leaves, so those guys are eating the leaves of the trees in Iceland, also causing some problems. Leaf beetles are very fascinating. I see them mostly in areas that are warm, like the tropics have a lot of leaf beetles, and apparently there's a lot of research going on with the Fratora leaf beetles because their larvae will incorporate chemicals in the plants they're eating into themselves to defend themselves against predators. And most insects that do that will be very specific in what plant they eat, but apparently the Fratora leaf beetle larvae are able to evolve very quickly to different types of plants, which, causes a problem in the plants of Iceland because, there's a evolutionary arms race going on and it can be quite stressful. One example of the evolutionary arms race is with the aphids. So aphids who are true bugs, so insects with a proboscis, so a trunk, and a nymph larval stage. So basically they don't have a complete metamorphosis. So aphids, we know about them in North America. They drink the sap of plants and by numbers can cause quite a bit of problems. They do have a very interesting life cycle where the females will alternate in generation between having wings and no wings. So mostly during the summer they have no wings, they stay in one place, and in the spring and fall they'll have wings and basically move somewhere else. There was a big evolutionary step with the trees of Iceland, specifically with the Scots pine that were introduced there. A lot of them were killed by the aphids, but they have managed to evolve to resist them. However, evolution is never a set thing. The Scots pine have managed to resist the aphids, but who knows what they'll have to fight off against. And the biggest issue here is that we have animals eating the trees, but we don't have enough predators to keep those populations down. Luckily, it is not completely doom and gloom. There is a few predators within the trees of Iceland. So first, we have the garden spider, who is native to Iceland, also known as the cross spider. So they have basically a white cross design on their abdomen. Very pretty spiders who are orb weavers. So basically, they are your spider that makes a web and catches things in the web. They do quite well in colder climates. Yeah, spiders in general do quite well in colder climates. I'm still trying to figure out why. Now, however, the spider is hunting flying bugs. Aphids rarely fly, So it's probably going to be able to catch the beetles and the sawfly. But there is something for the aphids, because in 1947, the lacewing was discovered in Iceland. Adult lacewings are pollinators who drink nectar, but their larvae is quite something. It is a very, very ferocious predator that loves to eat aphids and beetles. Anything that's at least not too hard, but they are very voracious. They're actually even more voracious than ladybugs. So, we got a nice little good news, but it is still a vagrant in Iceland. It seems like it hasn't fully settled in yet. So, what will happen to Iceland? Will it re-become the forested land that it was before the Vikings? Or will the trees not be able to keep up with the introduced species? That is up to us. And the first step in helping is, well, knowing about what's going on. So as we see, it is important to, well, learn about the wildlife, specifically the bugs and the tiny creatures of all those ecosystems. Because even the ones that are far off and might seem empty are actually full of life. And we need all that life all together because we are all interconnected. As we see in Iceland, the actions of humans 1,000 years ago has created erosion with the soil. And those problems are going to get bigger with climate change because in Iceland, because of how chaotic the climate is, instead of getting warmer, it's actually getting rainier. And without plants to keep the soil together, it will create landslides and things like that. Now, Icelanders are actually trying to fix that by planting trees, but the trees that are planted are not going to be as effective as the trees that are already here. So that is a lesson on us because, well, it shows us what's going to happen if we don't protect what we already have. And we can do this, specifically with collective action. Back home, I've talked in my previous documentaries about the Lemay Forest, and you know what? We are successful with that. There is still a lot of work that has to be done, but the city has voted against letting Maziar Yayapur, boo, and his little buddy John Winthrop, boo, to develop the area, all thanks to the collective actions of the people of St. Norbert, Winnipeg, and, well, all over the world. The coalition on Facebook to save the Lemay Forest has over 1,000 people. I am, well, doing my documentaries. Hey, ground beetle. Oh, bye, ground beetle. So remember, everyone, we can use your support, but also we can help you because you probably all have a little corner of this world that is very dear and important for the environment. So collectively, we can help save those little corners to make, well, a big corner. I think that's the right analogy. Yeah? Well, anyways, this was Julien Looks Under Things in Iceland. I hope you have a good day.